of environmental change. We just see it. It's just not normal. I mean, the glaciers are melting. We don't see that anymore. We see floods happening. I mean, we can go and you can look at all of the weather conditions that we see in the planet. So I think that that's important, and we are all responsible. There is, as students go and they protest in the streets, there is no plan B. There's no planet B. It's here.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Actionable ESG Talk series brought to you by AKFI Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry consortium committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. My name is Isabella. I am the co-host of this talk series together with another co-host here, Manuel. And our special guest today, Monique. Hi, Monique.
Hello, hello, hello.
Super happy to have you here. Thanks to this talk series, we get to connect with great minds like you, like many others, to together discuss the current state and the future state of ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. And a little bit about Monique before we get started to our audience. It's too much to mention. I'm just going to pick out what I like the most from the glance of the bio for now. Now we're going to have the whole bio on our description everywhere anyway. So Monique currently is a global technology leader with over 25 years of experience, and currently she holds the position of Senior Distinguished Architect for Emerging Technologies at Innovating Technologies. And Monique provides thought leaderships and develops strategic directions and visions, partnering with companies, industry forums. And her areas of expertise include cybersecurity, privacy, mobile payments, ethics in extended reality, metaverse, the things we care the most nowadays, and also blockchain. Monique has been working for various companies, and she's also the president and co-founder of the Humanized Internet. It's a Swiss-based nonprofit organization that focuses on digital identity and ethics in technology. And I can't wait to hear more from Monica about all the ethics issues, and that's where my interest also lies in. And Monica is also a member of the IEEE Ethics in Action Executive Committee and co-chair of the IEEE Ethics in Action Extended Reality Committee. Thank you, Monique, for joining us today. Let's get the conversation started and hear everything you have to share with us in terms of ethics, ESG, digital world, the digital future. Starting with the question on your thoughts on the current state of today's sustainability, ESG, and digital transformation trends.
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, Isabella, and also with Manuel. I think it's great that we have these discussions that count in an area that is so important to our society. So I want to first commence with thank you. It is also timely for this discussion, as you well know. Trust in the financial system has been failing, and this creates an example of what we're talking about with the you see what's happening in the financial area with Credit Suisse and UBS and all of the other the finance sectors. So trust is going to be important part of the discussion, especially when we're talking about this particular topic. So when we break it down, and some people think, especially in organizations, you have to have an ESG portfolio to have an ESG portfolio because it's interesting. This is not what we're talking about in digital transformation and also with regard to ESG itself, when we break it down. Because digital transformation is taking some of these older technologies and trying to actually make them, it is a transformation in terms of how do you deal with what is digital? How do you deal also with the intersectionality to the environment itself, the intersectionality to what is social and to what is governance. I think we need to break that down more. One of the things that is very, very important to me is that particular topic, and with it, to continue the kind of in the introduction as we are, Isabel and Manuel, and for the community overall, the wonderful things that you've mentioned also is that with IEEE there is an initiative called Planet Positive. And with Planet Positive, now you kind of see all of this coming together, not only for looking at metrics on how we measure our impact as businesses. So when we're talking about sustainability, what are we doing correctly or incorrectly with regard to how we use infrastructure, with regard to how we use our energy as an example? What are we doing? And I think that we need to come together, or technologies that may be toxic for the way we execute organizationally. So these are the areas that I think that from a sustainability perspective, organizationally, coupled with digital transformation, we certainly have to pay very much attention to. You're seeing more and more organizations coming out with chief sustainability officers, coming out with ESG portfolios, coming out with ESG principles and tenets that go way beyond what we call CSR, right? Corporate social responsibility, way beyond that. Because you don't want social responsibility to be a check in somebody's box from a organizational perspective. You really want the people, members of whether they're in companies or organizations, to rally around that particular topic and challenge whether or not we are all in the right path together. So that's how I would start to frame up the discussion. And
that's an excellent starting point. Please continue.
I think too, there is one of the things that we have to look at is the whole area around. One of the areas that I do care about is ethics, and so you could say which is, we know it's contextual, but there is this whole principle about when technology is created. What are the binding principles of why that technology is created? It's, people will say, well, if you smoke a pack of cigarettes, it could cause you cancer. When a technology is created, do we understand the purpose of that technology? Do we understand what the risks of use of technology is? Do we understand risks? When we say risk, safety, that is also contextual. Maluse, that could create problems, organizations, and create headlines. Let me just say that ethics and ESG combined with sustainability, that is caring about the principles, with digital transformation, is what builds a brand. And it builds a brand. If you break one of those pillars, if those pillars, one of them crack, your brand is broken, and it takes a while to come back, right? I mean, if you think about the earthquakes that are happening, when I say the pillars of trust that are lacking in the financial institutions as I enter this call, that's an example. I mean, we need to make sure we have a trust layer in this discussion, a trust layer where everybody's part of that community, and let me say to some level of transparency in the discussion. I mean, transparency insofar as that doesn't mean that your personal privacy is egreged, but more important of how technologies are used, how ESG is developed, how we measure it, and how we develop communities around it. I think the notion is that everybody is, like I say about cybersecurity, it's everybody's business. ESG is everybody's business. Sustainability is everybody's business. And so when I think this is something that we have to really take care for. And with that comes some level of metrics. I mean, how are you measuring? How do we want to measure? I mean, without measures, we can have a wonderful conversation today, but if we need to understand what kinds of metrics are important in this area. So some organizations take ESG and break it down to diversity and equity and inclusion as an example. That could be broad, but measurement is going to be an important component. What we use, what kind of KPIs, what we keep, we actually adhere to is going to be extremely pivotal to the discussion. The other thing is too, I think at a country level, is GDP the right measure? One of the issues that we have to think about is it is not. You shake your head, Manuel, but you're right. It's not the right measure. We have to think about how it is when we're looking at planet, the impact to our environment. And there are more and more organizations now trying to, or governments per se, or countries trying to think about how they actually develop blueprints around impact to the planet or impact to your environment, when you cut down a tree, and because tree, what it means versus just the standard GDP, and actually point that out as an impact measure. And I think these are really interesting discussions to have, not only at a policy making perspective, but also at, you can break down policy, country, and then also down to organizations and how they kept themselves to those levels of metrics. Because without that, I can tell you, I live in Switzerland, and we see the impact of environmental change. We just see it. It's just not normal. I mean, the glaciers are melting. We don't see that anymore. We see floods happening. I mean, we can go and you can look at all of the weather conditions that we see in the planet. So I think that that's important, and we are all responsible. There is, as students go and they protest in the streets, there is no plan B. There's no planet B. It's here, and we have a responsibility to make sure that we keep those policies in check. And so ESG is more than just, as I said, a check in somebody's list. It's not a CSR, and it's not, it could be, some people are looking at investment portfolios, and the investment portfolios become interesting because people will look at what it is this company is doing, how are they creating sustainability and measures, how are they creating environmental cares and measures, and what does governance look like? The governance around transparency. And certainly I will argue that there will be groups that will look at, maybe we invest in those types of companies that are doing exactly that, right? Doing exactly what we feel is transparent along the topic of ESG.
Very, very, very interesting. And I'm thinking of how to unpack this, because there are so many threads. Maybe a footnote on Credit Suisse and the Silicon Bank, very rapid, dismissal. I would point that the speed of information transmission plays a role. If we think of banks failing in 1929, you have to wait for the newspaper to be printed, and next day you hear about a run on the bank. Now you talk about milliseconds.
You absolutely do, and I say that because the exchange of information is rapid. It's real time, and so with that comes emotion. The psychology of money, the psychology of finance, the psychology of it all. Do you run with it? Somebody's Twitter can actually have impact across the world, right? So Twitter feed or whatever, social media and ESG is going to be very key too. And the use of social media, and that because responsible use of communications, for example, what is responsible? So I do agree, and it's not to be dismissive about any of these banks or financial institutions. It is, one aspect of it, but I don't want to go down that route. But this goes to governance. This goes to how our institutions are managed. This is the governance part of the ESG, right? Mm-hmm. The governance part. And if there is no trust, you do not have it. I don't care what organization you are in, you don't have it. And of course, as stated before, it's foundational to one's brand.
And as you link trust and I'll call it naked trust, because now trust goes back to the fundamentals. We instinctively tend to trust other people.
Mhm.
But when you have so much information, so much misinformation, when really things become exposed very quickly, we get this kind of, as you mentioned, emotional rushes, which can be transmitted through technology to a large audience. And you get run on the bank, for example.
I like the notion of emotional rashes. Yeah, I mean, so think about the whole issues around when we were talking about impact of technologies in the future, now and in the future. GDP is one of them, right?
GPT.
GPT, right? Chat GPT is another. I mean, I've been experimenting with Chat GPT, and so it's an example, or the example of metaverse and psychology, or psychology and metaverse. New. What I'll say is new and blockchain altogether. How do you create tokenized assets for loyalty, etc. New businesses and new. This will impact education. Uh, you know. Will develop as a result of this. We have to be able now to think about, the how we're actually where is the human in the loop in all of this, right? This is why we have to think about the technology for good and what good is, what good looks like, and the potential abuse. And abuse is also sort of contextual. So, for example, with one area that is well known, that is close and dear to my heart, is the metaverse, right? And digital twins. That kind of has this discussion. Do I choose to live? Does a crime, for example, that is committed within the metaverse, could that be prosecutable? That has, do we create metaverse law? So, if I kill you or do something very egregious within the metaverse, or steal your identity. By the way, this is another thing. Who am I speaking to? What is the avatar of the avatar of the avatar? What does that look like? So we have to define ethics around that definition, right? And so there's a corpus of work that needs to be done, and particularly in this space. And so my argument is that is going to have some level of responsibility in the end. We're kind of painting this sort of picture around us, but technology is moving very quickly, right? It probably always has, but it's moving very, 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 very quickly. And so, do I choose to live in the metaverse because I'm lonely? Do I choose? What does that mean? But on the other hand, there's the promise of, being able to interact with people within that metaverse, insofar as we know who they are, insofar as without, of course, violating any of the privacy laws that we see, or what data is being collected about us. This is an issue that is highly important for me. What is the data being collected for what purpose? And so, we pulsate data all the time. And so I think this is another area. So will I be able to have my own privacy button on and off? Will I be able to say it's on, it's off? Will I be able to, know what I'm doing, know with whom I'm speaking, etc., and have that sort of interaction that I feel comfortable with? Will I be able to, for example, if you're in the metaverse, and I know this is kind of, but I want to say it, I highly stress it's related to the entire ESG discussion we're talking about, from sustainability. Who will listen? Can I have a private conversation? Right? Can I have a conversation that's private without other people listening, and not knowing? So there's a lot to be done and said about it. And I think that we have great opportunities to do what I'll say good, insofar as good is well understood and well defined. There is a concern that we could actually be risking we give up everything. We give up, we basically say we give up privacy, we basically give up everything, and then we're at sort of risk at ourselves. We all have this responsibility. And so I think with friction, and this is with the thing, friction comes opportunities. And so teaching, for example, using the metaverse to teach nurses and healthcare workers. I think that's quite interesting. That's happening. Precision medicine is being developed, especially with the levels and levels of AI. But with all of this, it's learning conversations. It's learning. You're learning from society, and that gets to the question about the misuse on social media, the misuse of who am I talking to? Who is this person that looks like Isabella, but it's really not Isabella, right? I just created
I've seen that already. I've seen that already on Instagram when people start using those AI generated figures and they really look at human. And if you don't look at them carefully, you thought they're human, but you can identify those very nuanced facial expression. You can tell they're robots. It's literally getting more popular than ever right now.
And to your point, Isabella, think about what that means at a political level, right? At a politic level. So I think that has impact too. I think you and I and Manuel and to some extent our audience have a common understanding of what misuse is contextually, but the wider community may not. And so are we? It's a question of one of my colleagues. Who's an entrepreneur, one of the colleagues I met, who's French, but an entrepreneur from China. One of the questions that was asked was, are we creating a digital divide by these sets of technologies, right? What about, you have these, he particularly cares, his organization cares about the aging population, right? So are we creating that digital divide? By having this massive use of technologies that are coming when half the world is not connected yet, right? So half the world is not connected yet. So how do we actually have inclusion in making sure that we connect the world? We're talking from a point of view. If I were to go into a village in a country where there is now connectivity, one of the things though that people do have is some kind of mobile phone. Whether it's some kind of phone, they do have it as an extension of themselves, but it's still very, very, very rudimentary. But some of the people in these countries are actually leapfrogging, and which is massively interesting in itself. So I think that here's my point, we have it incumbent upon ourselves as leaders in this space to engage people on the journey, to engage organizations that are in countries, to engage policymakers. The policymakers have to be part of this journey. They must be part of this journey. Some of them are. I see it as an ecosystem play, right? It's a cross ecosystem play, but we cannot have a north-south, south-east-west divide. It has to be very, very inclusive. This is extremely important. It has to be inclusive, and I think that there is promise here too. I'm not. I don't want to create a kind of a narrative that is dystopian, but it's not. We're at the cusp of creating wonderful inventions, creating wonderful opportunities where it becomes a world of discovery for people in this particular space. So I'm very excited about the promise of ESG and sustainability transformations, not only within organizations, but at a policy level and also country level, and also the promise of creating new let's say new positions or new studies. You can have the intersectionality of law with computer science, or creating, like we said, metaverse law. You can create other kinds of interesting areas. It's not just about, I'm going to study computer science for computer science sake, and I'm going to be in this organization, and so on and so forth. So you can have a very eclectic background, I think, is the promise here, in my opinion.
Monique, again, multiple threads. First thing on metaverse, thank you for putting a wrapper around it, and a very good one, and connecting it with ESG and sustainability and trust. I would okay. I have a background in medical electronics in biomed, and you know, when I look, so I'm sort of by sheer lack positioned to understand the technology and to some level the functions of the brain. And my only recommendation would be an on-off reality button on the metaverse, because it's very easy, and organizations and political, economical, you know, businesses can very quickly, if they override this reality button, they'll make our minds change. It's the first time a technology can directly act on our brain, not through reading, not through listening, but through essentially act on the, you know, biochemistry of the brain, change our emotions. We talked about that.
Yeah, Manuel, I cannot agree with you more. I think that, you know, what is real, right? So if we live in these sort of worlds, people are looking at brain-to-brain communications and so on and so forth. And by the way, there's also a new, you know, has been evolving for some time, is neuroethics. And so I think that with neuroethics, this gets into my whole component about ethics. It has to be embedded in anything we do, right? In anything. What is the potential? What you're talking about, what I'm talking about, is the potential for harm, and harm to an individual, harm to an organization, harm across the way. So, you know, I sort of, I not sort of agree. I absolutely agree that there has to be, you know, it's not just privacy. What is real? You're living in this world. Do you choose to get out of this world, right? Do you choose to basically say, no, I'm going to remain here forever and ever more? And so, that is something we have to say. That is kind of the potential of harm. You know, this is where you say, we have to pay attention here, right? This is an area that we have to be absolutely this could be what you call a barrier to adoption, right? We call it, and then you have to come out with a sort of a recommendation, you know, a reality button. Or the other component I was thinking about actually is, you know, how you have the with the use of your computer or your you know, your smartphone, says you have been so much screen time. You've been 46 hours screen time. You can actually say you have so many hours of reality metaverse time, and then of course it just puts it to you, or you can set it up to actually say maybe this is you're overloading on the metaverse, right? Something to that effect. And I think those are the types of But this is what I mean is the promise, you know, it's the promise of creating these capabilities at the end of the day.
You pointed out also to something which I start to notice as a trend in education. In Cornell, in a small university called Minerva, in universities, in the large universities in the UK and US, where you find these sustainability labs. And all of them at the end are coming with multidisciplinary word in the description of the lab, because I think we over-specialized. And when we come to ethical problems, when we come to ESG problems, when we come to sustainability problems, we need a multidisciplinary approach. Exactly what you pointed out today, right? Where we draw this line between reality, where we draw the line between trust and lack of trust, where we draw the line between, you know, good way of doing sustainability and ethically, and where it becomes unethical, or it's sort of the wild west of the movies.
Oh, I love it because you know, when I'm within IEEE, the groups that I lead in this particular space or chair, people are coming in with exactly those eclectic backgrounds. They're humanist or you know, transhumanist, they're anthropologists, they may be psychologists. It's not just technical, right? The technology is an enabler, but it's not just, these are the people who are posing those questions of, hey, you know, this is what we see as something as potential that we have to care about. And they're academics too. So, you know, it's as I said, a cross-organizational view with different people, different backgrounds. It's not, otherwise we have a filter bubble, and a filter bubble, as we well know, just amplifies what we already know, and it's a loop. It's not a positive loop state, if you want to call it a positive loop state, right? So And that's what I think is as kind of the art of the positive here is, being able to break out and say, there are going to be new disciplines. I should actually say that I was recently accepted to for a PhD. I'm a doctoral candidate in cyber psychology. I'm just going to start. I'm just starting the journey. So the chair is Dr. Mary Aiken, and so that's a new discipline. I mean, well, she created the discipline years ago, but here you get into forensics and forensics of behavior, right? So that is part of, by the way, cybersecurity. But could you imagine cyber psychology use in the metaverse? Right? So when there's harm that's produced and what that means, right? So how do you actually find the miscreant characters? And so that is it's new for me, and it'll take about 3 years to complete.
Exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Also for
Yeah.
which university? It's the
Right, it's a Capital Technology University out of Maryland, CapTech, and so they have created these programs for people who are working for part-time, right? So you can actually, but you still have to go through the entire write a paper. You have to, they have to look at your background, they have, your transcripts, etc. And so either you produce a thesis or that you defend, and or you actually become published in, at least I think it's peer review journals, which is just as difficult. So it's also going through the connotation of research, what it is that research component, in addition to taking the prerequisite courses for the PhD itself, although they have a master's degree program. So it's a new area for people who would like to pursue a PhD, but not not step away from their working activities, but to be able to do it part-time.
It's very interesting. And, as we go through that, I wanted to mention also that Isabella, it's a clear representative of Gen Zers, and she wrote, a very, very, very interesting book of questions about this future.
Yep.
Near and far. And as you said, we cannot perceive, we cannot construct, we cannot model the future if we are not multidisciplinary. If it's only a technological future, it will be dystopic. If it's only a humanistic future, we won't have the strengths of the technologies to measure. You mentioned trust and measurement. They come together. If you don't trust the measurement, you don't trust. If the measurements are confusing, ESG is probably a bad case of confusing measurements and incomplete. Then how we build this trust? We put our economic system on ESG, we put our social systems, and we project on ESG and sustainability. And then you have trust and measurement, which you brought forward. But going back to the book, I'll go and say that in the digital mind of tomorrow, it's a book of questions, not of answers. We don't have answers about the future. And we have to construct these answers. As you said, they are contextual, and there are also multidisciplinary.
Well, I love so Isabella, I'd love to, I'm now going to very excitedly read your book, because I think that's important to pose the question. So thank you for pointing that out, Manuel, because look, the questions are important. Without the questions, we can create our own filter bubble. And on that note, I would like to say is I do believe in reverse mentoring. And let me just take a pause here on reverse mentoring. For example, this month is Women's History Month. Right? So if you're not aware of it, it is Women's History Month, and so
we know.
One of the through the ITU, one of the persons we had a chance to have as a dialogue. It's always with somebody younger and somebody older, or somebody more experienced, and so on. And so one of the persons that I had a chance to have this dialogue with is Elisa Torres, who is actually she's a 17-year-old girl out of Chile, and she created Girls in Quantum Computing. And she has ambassadors throughout the world, right? To have people understand what quantum computing is all about. I mean, when you think about what she's doing and the space she wants to be, she's interested in biosciences, by the way. She's now getting ready to go to college. I think for somebody that's what makes me so optimistic. In reversement, when I say reversement, I'm sitting there going, wow, think about it, think about that, right? So, and ambassadors in Egypt, ambassadors in India. I mean, you look at that and the way she uses social media to create these linkages and to educate people on what is the art of the possible in terms of quantum computing itself, an interest she has deeply. And by the way, she created this group, this organization, Girls in Quantum, when she was 16. So when she was 16. And so I don't know, you have Generation Zs, but you also have Generation Alphas now, right? So there's the alpha as an example. I hate to put people in sort of this, your Generation X, your Generation Y. I think we're because I don't know what that means anymore. It's like, okay, alpha, beta, and Z. I mean, so we got to go throughout the Greek alphabet. But I think it's more important to note, which is what I think is so. That's the art that's optimism here in this discussion, right? Pose the questions, go out and do something, but do it in a way that is responsible. And then bring people along the journey, bring people, I thought, oh, she's doing Girls in Quantum. I said, what about have the boys come in? She said, it's really actually, but it's something that is a space that she's created. And now it's sort of having its ripple effect across the worlds. Right. So, which is positive.
And I'll